The rain had been falling for days, turning the small farm into a sea of mud. Fields were flooded, fences were broken, and the animals were restless. But one animal's behavior was more than just restless, it was bizarre. A gentle old horse named Titan, usually calm and placid, was in a state of agitation. He stood in the middle of a muddy paddock, ignoring the shelter of his stable. He stared intently at one specific patch of ground, his ears pricked forward. Every few minutes he would raise a heavy hoof and stomp it down, hard, on the same spot. Thump, thump, thump. The sound was a rhythmic, obsessive drumbeat against the steady patter of the rain. His owner, an old farmer named George, watched from the porch, puzzled. "What's gotten into you, old boy?" he muttered, shaking his head. For 2 days, Titan kept up his strange vigil. He barely ate, refused to move from his spot, and continued his relentless stomping. George tried to lead him away, but the horse, normally so docile, resisted, planting his feet and letting out a distressed whinny. George was worried. Was the horse sick? Was he injured? He called the local vet, who came and examined Titan thoroughly. The vet was baffled. The horse was in perfect physical health. There was no logical explanation for his behavior. "I've never seen anything like it," the vet admitted, shrugging his shoulders. "Maybe he just senses something in the ground. A change in pressure before an earthquake, perhaps." But that didn't feel right to George. This wasn't just sensing. This was an obsession, a mission. The mud in that one spot was now a churned, soupy mess from Titan's constant stomping. On the third day, George's frustration turned to a deep, nagging curiosity. Titan's desperation seemed to be growing. His stomps were more frantic, his whinnies more pleading. George looked at the horse, then at the muddy ground, and a thought, absurd and unlikely, took root in his mind. "All right, Titan, all right," he said softly. "Let's see what has you so worked up." He grabbed a shovel from the barn. The rain had finally stopped, but the ground was heavy and waterlogged. He walked over to the spot, the mud sucking at his boots. Titan immediately stopped stomping and watched him, his large dark eyes filled with an intense, hopeful expression. George plunged the shovel into the mud. It was hard work. The ground was thick and clay-like. He dug for nearly an hour, his back aching, his hands raw. He was about to give up, to dismiss it as a horse's strange whim, when the shovel hit something. It wasn't a rock, it was soft. He dropped the shovel and fell to his knees, digging with his bare hands. The mud was cold and thick. He felt fur. Then, a small body. His heart stopped. He pulled it out. It was a tiny puppy, caked in mud, cold and limp. It looked like it was too late. George's heart sank. But as he held the small, lifeless form, he felt a faint, almost imperceptible twitch. He worked frantically, clearing the mud from its mouth and nose. He began to rub its tiny body, trying to generate warmth. Titan nudged him with his massive head, a low, encouraging rumble in his chest. And then, a miracle. The puppy coughed, spitting out a mouthful of mud and water. It took a tiny, shaky breath. It was alive. George stared in disbelief from the puppy in his hands to the giant horse standing over him. How? How could Titan possibly have known? The puppy must have been washed away in the flooding, a runt from a stray litter, and buried alive in the shifting mud. It had been entombed, suffocating slowly, with no hope of rescue. But Titan had heard its silent screams, or perhaps he had felt the faint vibrations of its desperate struggle deep within the earth. He had refused to move, refused to give up, until someone listened. George rushed the puppy inside, wrapping it in warm towels and giving it drops of milk. The little creature, a fighter, slowly began to recover. He named him Titan's Treasure, or TT for short. From that day on, the horse and the dog were inseparable. The tiny puppy would follow the giant horse everywhere, a small yapping shadow to a gentle giant. The story of what Titan did spread through the small community, a local legend. It was a story about an impossible rescue, an unbreakable bond between two unlikely souls. What was buried beneath the mud wasn't just a puppy. It was a testament to the fact that there are forms of perception that we can't understand. Sometimes, you don't need ears to hear a cry for help. You just need a heart that is big enough to listen to the silence and the patience to stomp on the ground until the world pays attention.